Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Hartledge, and I serve as president of the Louisville Forum. February is typically the month of our annual dinner, but this February, because of the pandemic, we're doing a lunchtime program virtually. This meeting is occurring by way of Zoom and also being live streamed on the Louisville Forum Facebook page. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. The program hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Although we may at times take up issues that have a national interest, we try to highlight it from a local perspective. The forum, by the way, never takes a position on an issue. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make a reservation in the future, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org. Though we are not doing an annual dinner on this particular February, which is the tradition of securing an outstanding speaker for the February event continues. Our speaker today is Congressman John Yarmuth, who serves Kentucky's 3rd District in the U.S. House of Representatives. John is in his 8th term as a member of Congress and has served as chair of the House Budget Committee since 2019. And John is a longtime supporter of the Louisville Forum. Former member, was a board member at one time, and he has spoken to this group many times in the past. And when challenged during an election year, John has always been willing to join his opponent for a debate in front of the Louisville Forum audience. And that is something, John, we greatly appreciate. It means a lot to the Forum. So, Representative Yarmuth, at this point, we thank you for being here, and we turn it over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Dan. Hello, everybody. It's great to be back at the Louisville Forum. I see a lot of familiar faces, and in this day and age, that's always something that you can be happy about. See so many people that you can't get to see very much anymore. This is obviously an incredibly interesting time in our nation's history, to say the least. I was telling a group earlier that having not met most of our freshman members, but some, I've been able to ask them, is this what you signed up for? You got sworn in on January 3rd, you were attacked on January 6th, then you had to impeach the president, and then you had to sit through the trial. It's pretty fairly eventful first month and a half. But I'm hopeful that from this point forward, we can actually operate more like a Congress is supposed to act and get on with the business of the country. Let me first say that I will unavoidably make highly partisan remarks today. I should have a buzzer that says, okay, here's a partisan remark. I'm going to do that because my world is so partisan right now, it's almost impossible to do that. So I apologize, but please note, whether you're a Democrat, Independent, or Republican, when I talk about Republicans in this context, I'm talking about congressional Republicans. I'm not talking about citizen Republicans. I'm talking about those people who are on the other side of the aisle in Congress, because that's an important distinction, which I'll get into shortly. In talking about what we can anticipate seeing in Congress, in the 117th Congress, I'm going to use as background a meeting I had about a week and a half ago at the White House. And people tell me I've been much too ready to say the meeting in the Oval Office. And I probably have been, because I'd never been there before. All the times I've been to the White House before, mostly with President Obama, we met in the Roosevelt room or the cabinet room or one of the secure rooms, depending on what the topic was. And when we went over there a week and a half ago, there were 13 of us. We had to get there early. We got tested for COVID and waited around. And then we were led through some different rooms and then outside and then inside. And we had never been told, or at least I hadn't been told, where we were going to meet. So we go through this room where there are 4 or 5 desks, and then a door opens and President Biden is standing there greeting us all as we came in, which is different President Obama loved to make grand entrances. We would always all be seated and then he'd come in and we'd all stand up and no hail to the chief. But anyway, Joe Biden was right there greeting us all as we came in. And so I walked in, he was right there. We bumped elbows. He said, first thing out of his mouth was, I need help with my handicap. So I guess maybe I'll have the opportunity to play golf with President Biden at some point. But so I did that, walked around him, started looking around, and I said, wow, I think this is the Oval Office. And I can say that I sat there for about 30 seconds and said, okay, I get it. I get the mystique here. And when you think about basically every president of the United States since John Adams was in that room, I guess Jefferson, no, I can't remember, but pretty much all of them have been there. It's pretty breathtaking. And I was sitting right next to the Resolute desk, right in front of the Resolute desk, looking straight through those two couches at the president and the vice president. And it was pretty heady, I will say. And my son, Aaron, after the meeting, he said, at what point in the meeting did it ever seem like a normal meeting? And I said, never, not from minute one to the last minute. It was quite an experience. But just the experience of being there was one thing, but the meeting itself was incredible. And that's what I want to use as a jumping off point. We met for 2 hours straight. President Biden was incredibly conversant with every topic that was brought up. Anybody who thinks he's not on top of his game hasn't really watched carefully. It didn't matter what anybody brought up, and we all had opportunities. Each of us described our role in this process of getting the American Rescue Plan passed in Congress, and then since we had our 2 minutes or so, we all used it as a way to mention a personal issue. And no matter what it was, he understood the issue, he was conversant in it, and he never called on staff to answer except for one time. And he asked Ron Klain, the chief of staff, to describe the rollout plan for the vaccination and the delivery of the vaccination. So my impressions of the meeting were one, that Joe Biden is, as he has said publicly, when he thinks about partisanship, he thinks about the American people's partisanship. He doesn't think about congressional partisanship. So he fully believes that he has bipartisan support for his agenda out in the public. And that's the most important thing to him. And I think it's pretty clear that it's emboldened him to take advantage of his political capital and use it to get his agenda passed, a lot of his agenda passed, whether he has to roll over Republicans to do it or not. And more on that later. But it's also pretty amazing that in 2 hours of meetings with a very partisan group, I mean, we're all partisan Democrats, he never once talked about electoral politics, not once. Everything was about the policy. And everything was about the urgency of the policy. And that to me was very refreshing and very promising, because I can honestly say I have not sat through a meeting in years with my colleagues where electoral politics was not brought up, no matter what the issue was. And it was, again, so different and refreshing to sit in a room and talk about policy for 2 hours with people who were serious about policy. So that's kind of prelude to where we're going. As you know, right now, our top priority in the Congress, and certainly the president's top priority, is to get this COVID relief package passed. And it's called the American Rescue Plan. Its cost is roughly $1.9 trillion. And we are using a process to pass it, which I have referred to from day one as our Plan B. We would love to have bipartisan participation in a relief package. as you know, going back, we passed 3 bills on a bipartisan basis, but we spent a lot of last year waiting for Republicans to help us proceed. So, and of course, we didn't have, Republicans were in control of the Senate all of that year. So we passed a major bill in April, the CARES Act. We passed another bill in May, the HEROES Act. Mitch McConnell said at that time, we need to slow down, we need to wait and see how things go. And I don't think that was a terribly irrational statement at the time, because most of us thought that the whole thing was going to be over in the summer of 2020 and that we would be back to normal. And so we were thinking in one time frame. But what I do blame him for was never thinking about Plan B. And Plan B was, what happens if the pandemic isn't over by July or August of last year? Where do we go from there? So we went the entire year until October, fully understanding that it was getting worse, not better. And finally came up with a halfway measure in December, done on a bipartisan basis, but something that we knew at the time, and the president certainly said at the time, was not nearly enough to get us to the other side of the crisis. So that's what we're doing right now. And the process that we're using is something called reconciliation. And you could take 10 football fields and plant them in weeds, and you wouldn't get out of the weeds talking about reconciliation. It is a very, very nerdy and complicated process. But basically, it allows a bill to be passed in the Senate with a simple majority. It doesn't have to get the 60 votes that most bills have to get to avoid a filibuster. So it's very complicated, and the Budget Committee plays a central role. So a couple of weeks ago, we passed a budget reconciliation resolution, which basically told 12 different committees in the House how they had to spend an amount that they had to spend. And again, this gets technical and it's not worth talking about, but that process has already happened. All those committees have given us their plan. We have now assembled them into one bill that will go back through the Budget Committee next Monday, and then it will go to the Rules Committee and then to the floor, and we will pass it in the House at the end of next week. At the same time, the Senate is trying to go through the process that would allow them to pass it with the simple majority. And there are rules and the parliamentarians involved. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but the highlights of this bill, if we end up passing it and getting it signed into law, which we're committed to doing before March 14th, would provide significant amounts of money for unemployment insurance supplement, a federal supplement, which we had back in the original CARES bill, $600 a week. This is $400 a week, but it extends through September. For anybody who's collecting unemployment benefits, it provides $300+ billion for aid to state and local governments. Get into the impact on us in a minute. It provides $130 billion to help us open the schools safely, and another $160 or $70 billion to actually fund vaccines, buy more vaccines, distribute them, contact tracing, testing, all of the things that actually immediately deal with the virus itself. And then finally, a $1,400 check to supplement the $600 that went to most Americans after the December bill. So that would meet a total of $2,000 each for after the middle of March. So those are the major provisions of the bill. There are lots more that you will probably read about in the days to come. But for the most important thing is anybody who's unemployed in Kentucky will be getting an additional $400 a week, and will be getting that through September. About 85% of Kentuckians and Louisvillians will be getting another $1,400, and that's adults and children and dependent children. Dependent adults. Those are like college students who are claimed on their parents' tax returns, but are not 21. those people were left out of the original bill back last April. So there's going to be a very substantial injection of money into the economy across the country. The state and local government portion is going to be very, very significant. Kentucky will get about $2.5 billion. The state government will get $2.5 billion. Another $1.8 billion will be distributed among counties and cities. In Louisville, it's estimated, these are all estimates now, the city of Louisville will get $250 million, and the county, which is the same as the city, but they're giving money to counties and cities, gets another $180 million. So a total of $400 million would come in to the city to help offset lost income, but primarily to help deal with the costs of dealing with the crisis and providing aid to local businesses and so forth. There's a lot of flexibility in how those funds can be used, which was an important change from the original CARES Act. So again, if all goes well, we'll pass that by March 14th. The March 14th date is critical because the current unemployment supplement, which we passed in December, expires on March 14th. So we don't want people to have a lapse in their benefit, their supplement, and that's why we're committed to doing it by that date. So once we do that, we will turn to other things. And I think it's clear that the Biden administration has a number of priorities. They happen to pretty much match Democratic priorities. One of them is a substantial infrastructure bill. It will also be significantly expensive, probably close to what we're going to pass with the American Rescue Plan. And it will be roads, bridges, water systems, sewer systems, broadband. It's not just a roads and highways and bridges bill at all. And we're hoping again that we can get bipartisan support for this. We think it's a possibility. Historically, we've gotten bipartisan support on infrastructure bills, and but that's going to be a top priority. We are allowed to use the reconciliation process twice this year, once for fiscal year 21, which we're still in, once for fiscal year 22. So we may, if plan A doesn't work, where we can't get bipartisan support, we will use reconciliation probably to do infrastructure. And one of the other priorities of the Biden administration and the Democratic caucus is immigration reform. And this is something that is obviously highly controversial. It's something that I think Donald Trump kind of poisoned the well on over the last few years. As you may remember, George W. Bush was a very strong supporter of comprehensive immigration reform, of providing a path to citizenship for the 11 or 12 million non-citizens who are in the country right now. And so this has generally been something where there was bipartisan interest. We all know we have a broken immigration system and we have to fix it. It's not like this is an optional exercise for the Congress. And the president's committed to that. His bill is going to be introduced tomorrow or Friday in the House. So everybody will have an opportunity to see what that looks like. And then the final initiative that I think you're going to hear a lot about is going to be climate legislation. And some of this will occur within the infrastructure proposals, but some of it will be outside of that. And the president is, again, this is one of his top priorities, to do something serious at the federal level on climate change. And I think most Democrats feel that way. I don't believe that the federal government is the sole answer to climate change. But I think this really is an all hands on deck issue. It's every citizen, it's the private sector, it's the NGOs, you name it. Everybody has a role to play in actually getting a handle on carbon emissions and trying to reverse the pattern that we're in now. But those are the four major areas I think that you're going to see most of the activity in Congress embody. And I'm going to stop in a minute, but there are just a couple things that I want say, generally speaking. One is, again, how we act is going to depend to a large extent on Republicans. I have a hard time understanding how Republicans are going to oppose this American Rescue Plan when so many of their citizens are going to get $1,400, when so many of their mayors and county executives and governors, Republican mayors, county executives, and governors all over the country are pushing them to provide this kind of support. But so far, they don't seem to want to participate. And that's a bad sign. I know how that felt because we tried back in 2009 and 2010 when we were trying to pass the Affordable Care Act. We tried everything we possibly could to interest Republicans in helping us. And when you're trying to do something that impacts 18% or so of the economy and every American's life, you would like to have buy-in from both parties. We never were able to get that. And so we're prepared to do whatever we can within the rules to get these agenda items moving. If we don't, there's going to be a lot of pressure on members of the Senate to do away with the filibuster. And this is going to be a hot debate, I believe. And the filibuster requires, again, that you get 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. The filibuster was not in the Constitution. The filibuster was actually invented by Southern racists to prevent any civil rights legislation. First of all, any anti-slavery legislation, and then just general civil rights legislation to pass through the Senate. It has a horrible, ugly past. In modern times, it has basically turned the Senate into not even a debating society, basically just a big room with a lot of desks because they have not done anything. As you may know, last Congress, when we were in the majority and the Senate was run by Republicans, we passed 400 bills in the House that were never considered in the Senate. And about 2/3 of them were bipartisan bills. They came out of the House with bipartisan majorities, and the Senate just didn't want to take the time to work on them, even to consider them. And if that's the way the Republicans in the Senate are going to operate this Congress, it's going to be, again, there's going to be a lot of pressure on us to eliminate the filibuster, which we can do with 50 votes and the vote of the vice president breaking the tie. And I'm not going to go on any further because that's too long a discussion. One other thing I want to mention, but I just do want to talk about the structural problems in the Senate now. So just to give you something to think about, Joe Biden won 50 counties in the country. I'm sorry, 500 counties in the country this last November. Donald Trump won 3,000. So Donald Trump won 6 times as many counties as Joe Biden did. Those 500 counties contain or produce 82% of the country's GDP. The 3,000 counties produce 18% of GDP. So we have a system now in which states and areas of the country that actually are atypical, they don't represent what the country looks like, but they have a structural advantage in the Senate. They have a structural advantage in Frankfurt, where we face the same dynamic to a certain extent there. Another data point, California has 2 votes in the Senate and has 40 million people. There are 15 states that combined have 38 million people and have 30 votes. So you see what this leads to. In the Senate since 2000, beginning in 2000, the Republicans in the Senate, even though they have frequently had the majority, have never been elected by a majority of the American people. So regardless of how small the Democratic percentage was, they have always had more voters vote for them than Republicans have had. So this manifests itself in the Electoral College, but more importantly, it manifests itself in the way the Senate does business. And it's something that is really causing the Congress to not be able to do what it's authorized to do in the Constitution. So with that, I will say I have great optimism that we're going to make progress on behalf of the American people this year, and we're going to be working very hard to do that. So thanks, and let's have questions.
All right. Thanks very much, John. I think what we'll do is we'll kind of bounce around and we'll start with Nicole, who is going to have a couple questions for you. Then we'll go to Keith. Go ahead, Nicole.
Okay.
Hey, boss, have a couple
Hey.
for you. One, I'm going to ask you one, which I love the story behind this one, and then the second one. So the first one is, seeing your F on your lapel, is there any chance that any sensible gun controls could pass now that the Dems control the House, Senate, and White House, or does the NRA have some Dems to intimidate as well? And then I think you should tell the story how you came up with the F. And then the second question for you is, tell us about your experience on January 6th. So where you were, how that all went down.
Sure. First, this is my F rating from the NRA. By the way, I wear it proudly. And I will have to tell the story when I started doing it. And so I'll tell the history. I was sitting around one day with my then daughter-in-law, my son, and my wife. And I said, I'm thinking about having a button made that says, proud to have an F rating from the NRA. And my now daughter-in-law said, no, just do an F. And I said, you're right, that's brilliant. So we had the F done. I started wearing it, tweeted it, took a picture, tweeted it out, said, proud to be wearing my F from the NRA. I gave some to my colleagues. They did the same thing. They got great, all of this got great reaction, on social media and so forth. And a few months later, the NRA actually took their rating system off their website because they said our enemies are using them against us. So I feel proud of that. But there is a good chance, we passed, it's interesting, we passed universal background checks in the last Congress, didn't go anywhere in the Senate. We passed it with a bipartisan majority. Mitch would never take it up. The Senate back in, I want to say 2012, passed universal background checks on a bipartisan basis. It's a different Senate today. But again, if we don't eliminate the filibuster, I don't see how it gets passed in the Senate. If we do eliminate the filibuster, I think there's a good chance. And I'm not sure there are any Republicans who will vote for it, but there are some Republicans who are retiring that at the end of this term who I think might be willing to do that. So we'll see. That is also, the president just last week put out his proposal for gun safety reform. It's another priority of his. So hopefully we can do that. And the second question was what, Nicole, I'm sorry. Oh, my experience. So I was in my office on the 6th. I'm very glad that I'm the type of person who doesn't feel that he needs to be everywhere to see something in person, that a lot of times you can see things better on TV. So I was in my office watching the proceedings. About 1 o'clock, we had bangs on the door and we were told to evacuate. And that was because there were pipe bombs across the street from my building, the Cannon House Office building. So we evacuated to another building, office building, for about 45 minutes, came back to my office, started watching again. And then I got a notice text. There's an external threat to the Capitol, stay in your office, lock the doors and stay away from the windows. Fortunately, I told my staff to stay home that day. I didn't think there was any reason for them to be there. We knew that there were going to be lots of crowds there. We certainly didn't anticipate what we ended up experiencing. But anyway, so I was there when, again, people were running up and down the hall, banging on the doors, and I didn't really know what to do because one office thought they were told these were the Capitol Police, and they were just running by and and screaming, but I couldn't exactly tell what they had said. So I sat there in my office for the next 6 hours. And with watching what was going on and I was never afraid for myself. I was very much afraid for my colleagues who were in the Capitol, those, media people whom I deal with all the time, the staff, all those people who were there, I was worried about for sure. But at the time, most of the video that we saw that day was video from outside. We didn't see the horrors that were going on inside. We did hear that there was a gunshot that went off near the House chamber. We were obviously worried about that. But I spent most of the day just in total sadness, unable to process what was going on. And I still haven't processed it. Even after watching the whole trial, I haven't processed it. But it was just total sadness that this could happen in the country, that Americans could turn on Americans like that. And that our politics had reached the point where that seemed like an appropriate answer to certain Americans. And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to process it.
Thanks. Thank you, John. Sure is a
Yeah.
tough time. Keith, go ahead. I think you have a question.
Sure, and thank you for joining us this afternoon, Congressman.
Sure.
This is a two-part question from one of our audience members. Should a bill aimed at coronavirus relief be used for wider political goals, such as addressing income inequality? Are Democrats using the crisis to implement a redistribution of wealth?
Well, I don't think so. I know that some people are claiming that that's what we're doing. I think you can make a pretty good case for everything we're doing that it is related to either the virus itself or the economic damage that's been done by the virus. And, I think it would be the same thing as if you had the same way you would deal with a natural disaster. Although this is a national natural disaster. We provide aid, we provide money to all sorts of people when there's a natural disaster to try to keep them on their feet and so forth. The one provision that I would say is a stretch to make that argument is raising the minimum wage to $15. That is a long-time goal of a lot of Democrats, a lot of people out in the country, but we could have done that 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We could do it next year. So my guess is that that's not going to make it as a part of this process, because it does I think anyway, that it technically violates one of the rules of the process. And I suspect it will end up being taken out. But with that exception, even paid family leave, with all the people who are having to care for their kids, their relatives, well, you get it. Certainly the disruption of because of the pandemic has made that an important component of, again, a comprehensive approach to dealing with the impact of the virus. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I have a question that was texted to me. It says, President Trump tried for 4 years to do an infrastructure deal, but the Democrats refused. Now the Democrats are anxious to do an infrastructure deal. Why the sudden change of mind?
Well, he said he wanted to do it. He never did it. Starting in his first month in office, he said, we're going to do a major infrastructure plan. We said, love it. Bring it. We'll do it. To the last month of his administration, he was still saying, this is infrastructure week. We're going to, maybe not the last month, but back in last fall, this is infrastructure week. We're finally going to get the infrastructure. We're going to introduce our infrastructure bill. Never did. So we passed an infrastructure bill last year, actually. We passed about $1 trillion bill that was a good bill. Again, it never went anywhere in the Senate, but we would have loved to have done it. We kept asking the president, to the extent that that our leadership had an opportunity to. They said, bring us one. We would love to vote on it for you. We would love to work on it with you.
And also, Congressman, literally breaking news, just received word that Rush Limbaugh has passed away.
Um,
Any thoughts or comments regarding the passing of Rush Limbaugh?
Well, first of all, you know, I would never celebrate anybody's death. And I will give Rush Limbaugh credit for developing and sustaining an incredible career for a long period of time. I will not miss his voice, but yeah, I'm sorry for him and his family.
All right, Nicole?
Let's get off mute here. So let's see. Several prominent Democrats have proposed the imposition of a wealth tax. CPAs know such are extremely difficult to administer. Is there any significant support in the House for any tax charged against net worth?
I think that is mostly, as far as I can tell, that is mostly Elizabeth Warren, Bernie, and a few members of the House. I don't think that is I've never heard leadership talking about that as a top priority or something that they want to pursue. I think, you know, there's more interest in an increase in the income tax at higher levels. But again, I don't hear much talk these days about a wealth tax. But I mean, you hear it from people who have a lot of visibility and have a huge audience. So it probably seems like there's more support for that than reality.
Okay, another question for you, Congressman, is a national budget is a document that reveals a great deal about the moral and ethical character of the country. As chair of the budget committee, please discuss the top priorities of the current expenditures outlined in the budget.
Well, we're going to be working on the budget for a budget resolution for fiscal 22, starting in either late March or early April. We have to wait for the president to submit his budget because we want to see how much common ground we have with the White House. Having put together some top line spending budgets over the last few years, I will say that what we will do and what we will try to do is accommodate two very different segments of our caucus. And because we have to assume that we will not get any Republican votes for any budget that we develop. And in a very, very tight majority, which, you know, we can only lose right now 5 or 6 votes if we're going to pass something through the House. And I'm not sure we can put together a budget that will be able to do that. We'll try. And it's basically, we have a lot of members, when I say a lot of members, 30 or 40 probably, who will not vote for a defense appropriation the size of what the budget now is for the Defense Department, which is $760 billion a year. And then we have a lot of other members who will not vote for budgets which have significant deficits in them. So we have our Blue Dog members who are more conservative members, and they have trouble voting for big deficits. And we have members who won't vote for big defense spending. That makes it very difficult. So we'll try to do a budget that resembles the budget deal that we made in 2019, where we basically said we're going to have robust defense spending, but we're also going to have robust domestic spending. And let me just quickly, we are responsible, the Budget Committee and the Congress, for roughly $1.4 trillion worth of spending a year. That's regular spending. That's what we call the discretionary budget. rest of the budget, which is 70% of what we spend, is the mandatory spending side. That's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the interest on the debt, and a few other programs. So on the discretionary side, we have defense spending, which is a little more than half of all the discretionary spending. And then the other half is everything else the government does. So it's housing, it's infrastructure, it's education, it's veterans, it's you name it, it's the FBI. Everything else the government does is in that half of discretionary spending. So that's what we're trying to put together, and it's not going to be easy, but we're going to do it.
Okay, thanks. Keith, the floor is yours.
Sure. Congressman, what is your take on Senator McConnell's statement after he ultimately voted to acquit former President Trump? He also seemed to claim that the former president could be subjected to criminal or civil liability.
Yep. Well, he's accurate. I mean, that's true. The thing about Mitch's statement, and I would never show any sympathy at all for Mitch McConnell. He puts himself in the positions that he ends up in. He has been in a real box here, trying to maintain, first of all, somewhat of an honorable legacy, but on the other hand, trying to hold his conference together and his donors on board. So he created the excuse that 43 members used to vote to acquit the president. And then he gave the speech, which I guess was his attempt at redemption. It was a good speech. All of our managers, our impeachment managers could have given it. The problem is that he's had 4 years to give a similar speech, and he's never done it. And he's basically enabled President Trump for those 4 years, and all of which culminated in January 6th. So again, I know he's in a tough spot, but I don't feel sorry for him. But again, the substance of the speech was excellent. And he's absolutely right. The president can face criminal and civil prosecution. My colleague, Benny Thompson from Mississippi, just filed a suit against him yesterday, a civil suit due to the insurrection. And you'll probably see some more. And then the question is whether prosecutors will do it. My guess is that the Justice Department will not try to prosecute him for January 6th. It's still a tough case to make beyond a reasonable doubt, so it's a different standard than an impeachment trial. And so that to me is not a cut and dried case of beyond a reasonable doubt. So, but the Attorney General of the District of Columbia might, I assume he's going to be prosecuted for other things in the Southern District of New York and possibly in New York State. But anyway, I'm glad Mitch gave it. But again, I don't think that redeems his actions in basically facilitating everything Donald Trump did for 4 years.
And sort of a local take on the climate change topic.
Yeah.
What happens to Kentucky's economy when a national climate plan takes its toll on low electric rates we currently enjoy, and which also attract businesses to locate here?
Well, what the data all show is that the cost of renewable electricity generated by renewables is coming way down. So there may be a period of time when energy is a little more expensive, but part of it depends on what the plan looks like. I heard Bill Gates the other day made a strong case for nuclear power, and that could end up being a part of a plan that's negotiated. I don't think anybody thinks the Green New Deal is going to be enacted anytime soon, and the Green New Deal was more conceptual than it was detailed and specific. So again, I would have to answer, depends what the plan is. But right now, we're mining very little coal in Kentucky. We're mining almost no coal in eastern Kentucky. There's still some coal being mined in western Kentucky. Natural gas has become the fuel of choice. So if the climate plan were to really de-emphasize natural gas, I think that would be very difficult. I think natural gas has to continue to be a part of the energy picture for a while, and maybe for a long while.
Thank you, Congressman. A text question to me says, please discuss the wisdom of putting $4 trillion on the country's credit card, $2 trillion for the rescue plan, and $2 trillion for infrastructure.
I am so glad you asked that question. I would love to have everybody who is concerned about debt to read a book called The Deficit Myth by a woman, an economics professor named Stephanie Kelton. And it basically outlines what is currently called modern monetary theory. And modern monetary theory basically says that as the issuer of a sovereign currency, that being the United States government, we can spend whatever we need to spend on whatever we need to spend it on, constrained by only one thing, and that is that we can only put as much money into the economy as the economy can absorb. So theoretically, if we said we're going to give everybody $200,000 to buy a house, we could do that. We could spend the money, but price of housing would go so high because there's not enough supply that you have serious inflation in the housing market. Most economists, and I'm talking about people from from Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, to very liberal economists to even conservative economists, say debt is not a problem for us right now. And the problem is, and this is why this book is so important, because it changes the way you think about money. We all tend to think about money in our own frame of reference. So we think about our households, we think about our businesses, we think about state and local government. None of those are issuers of currency. They are users of currency. We all are users of currency, and so are state and local governments. The federal government is not. The federal government is like, and this is Stephanie Kelton's analogy, is like the banker in Monopoly. The banker in Monopoly gives all the money out. And if you run out of the printed currency under the rules of Monopoly, you take a piece of paper and you write it out. That's what the federal government can do. And if you think about it this way, the national debt, which is, its big number, 20-something trillion, is not really debt. It is the accumulated amount that the federal government has put into the economy for over its history minus taxes. And it means very little. And I've just had a conversation with Professor Kelton the other day, because I asked the question, does accumulated debt, the amount of accumulated debt, have anything to do with inflationary pressures? So in other words, if you're going to spend $1, does it matter where that dollar is spent after you have $10 trillion worth of debt, $20 trillion worth of debt, or $30 trillion worth of debt? Is that dollar any more likely to cause inflation, depending on what the national debt is? And she said, no, it's not. That's not a factor. And she gave me a long explanation of it. But so we think about money the wrong way. We've been borrowing. We've been accumulating debt for all of our 240 years as a nation. We have not been a sovereign currency issuer for that period of time. We were on the gold standard for a long period of time. But now that we are a sovereign currency, again, we can do what we need to do. And again, you can talk, Jerome Powell is probably the biggest proponent of this theory right now. We had a hearing in Budget Committee last year called Does Debt Matter? Because we were trying to get at this question. And we had 4 economists across the spectrum philosophically, and they all basically said, no, it doesn't matter right now. People are beginning to look at the question of debt, federal debt, in a very different way now. So we can do it. The United Kingdom can do it. China can do it. Japan can do it. Brazil can do it. European Union can't do it. They don't have those countries don't have sovereign currencies. So they're in a different position. But it's a fascinating topic. The more I've gotten into it, the more I've realized that I didn't know anything about our money supply, and I've learned a lot about it. So the point being, we're nowhere near the point at which we have to worry about putting more significant money into the economy. And the other way I put it, I know we're running up against time. If I'm sure that there were people when the national debt hit $100 million under Abraham Lincoln who said, we're leaving this burden on our grandchildren. When it was $1 trillion, hit $1 trillion under Reagan, people said that, and that they've been saying it all along in our history. This is an incredible burden on our children and our grandchildren. Has any grandchild ever been asked to pay off any portion of the national debt? No, because it's not real. And it will remain that way as long as we have a sovereign currency. Now, there's one other thing that could screw it up, and that is that if some kind of cryptocurrency, if Bitcoin or something else, becomes the standard of international transactions, that could mess it up. I don't know how likely that is, but as long as we pay our bills, borrow and pay our bills in our own currency, then we don't have to worry about what we're spending right now. And by the way, one other thing, all the things that economists warned 20 years ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago would happen if we keep accumulating debt have not happened. So we have historically low interest rates, we have no inflation in the economy, and the dollar is trading in the same range vis-a-vis other currencies it has for 15 years. So, and that's when we've actually doubled the national debt essentially in the last 12 years. But none of the adverse repercussions have happened. And that's why there's a growing rethinking of how we think about debt in the country.
Thank you, Congressman. And we're going to get greedy and try to squeeze in, I think, Nicole, if you have one more question that we could squeeze in with a brief answer before we close it out.
I do. Is there any room for a bipartisanship? And if so, can you think of something that you might be able to get the Republicans to agree on?
We can all be hopeful. We are thinking about, by the way, doing away with, reinstituting earmarks, which are essentially congressionally directed spending. And we're not thinking about it, we're going to do it. And we've had bipartisan agreement on that. When you actually have people with money in the game, so everybody would have money that they can deliver to their district, projects that they can deliver to their districts, that encourages bipartisanship because people want that. They want to deliver for their district. And so I'm hoping that that type of thing, whether it's infrastructure bills or other programs, education, housing, so forth, where we allow members to actually deliver for their district, I think that can generate a lot of bipartisanship.
All right. Good question. Good, concise answer. And I think we're at the end of our hour. So, Congressman, we thank you very, very much for taking the time to do this on what I'm sure is a very busy time for you. So, on behalf of the entire forum, we wish you all the best throughout this year, a good, productive, safe year. To the audience, in March, we will get back into a regular schedule. Well, I say that, we'll probably meet on the second Wednesday of March, which will be March 10th, but you never know, we're virtual, so we have more flexibility. As soon as a topic and a panel is established, you will get an email about that, and you can certainly keep an eye on the website at louisvilleforum.org. And with that, we conclude our February 2021 program. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. Stay warm and stay safe. Thank you.